Hi everyone, welcome to the Cambridge Creatives Q&A with Abraham Adeyemi. Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Ellie, and we are the founders of Cambridge Creatives. We are a student-run creative collective. We are curating a series of talks with world-renowned professionals in film, TV and theatre. So please follow our Facebook page to find out more about future events. Just a couple of housekeeping rules before we begin. If you have any questions for our guest speaker, please type them into the Q&A box and we'll read them out for you. It should just be down at the bottom somewhere. Let us know if there are any technical difficulties, particularly today, and please let us know in the chat if you can't hear or see us. Enjoy the Q&A.
So Abraham is an award-winning filmmaker and playwright. He is a graduate of the prestigious Royal Courts Writers Group, and his writing has been staged at numerous British theatres. In 2019, he was one of 2 winners of the Soho House Global Screenwriting Competition, and this led him to produce his winning script, No More Wings, making his directorial debut. We are really honoured to have this talented creative speak. So my first question for you, Abraham, is when did you know that you wanted to write or wanted to work in the creative industries?
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I've always loved writing, and when I say I've always loved writing, I'm not talking about scripts or stories. It's that I've always loved words. So when I was in school, I always loved writing essays. When I was in primary school, I remember being really excited for our year 6 SATs because I knew I was going to get to write a letter, which really excited me. So I've always just enjoyed words in any shape or form, and I'm that friend who writes really, really long text messages and pisses everyone else off. In regards to specifically wanting to write scripts, it was something which I wanted to do I started to consider it in 6th form, and I don't think I realised this until one of my teachers pointed it out to me. But I remember when I was in 6th form, we had our house drama competition, and I wrote in both years I wrote 2 really bad scripts. One was like an adaptation of High School Musical, and the other was a take on like a music album that I really loved called Street Love by an artist called Lloyd. But it was finally when I was in my 2nd year of university and I was studying international politics. And at that point, I was very much going into either law or investment banking. Like that was where my life was always heading to. And that was complemented by the fact that I had done placements in both of these fields and was quite confident that should I have completed my degree, I would have ended up in those worlds, in one of those places where I'd done my placements. But I had a close friend pass away at the start of my 2nd year of university, and I think that really had an impact on me and made me think that, you know, life will one day end, and it might end a lot sooner than you think it will. You're not guaranteed to live to like 100. And with that in mind, I just got really unhappy, and I wanted to do whatever would make me happy. And I just thought to myself, well, what's always made you happy? I thought I've always loved writing, and that was it. I think I made this decision like very reactively, and yeah, I've been talking to some of my close friends recently with all the amazing things that are going on, and we just talk about how everyone thought I was insane when I said I'm dropping out of university to write. And I agree, I was insane, but I've always thought that whatever I decided to do with my life, I would succeed in it. And so as crazy as that decision was to take, I thought, well, it will go all right, because anything I've ever put my mind to, I think I have thrived in it. So yeah, 2011, dropped out of Brunel, and here I am 9 years later, sort of doing all right in that thing.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Is that what inspired you to study creative writing? And how did that help you and provide you with the tools to actually sort of professionally write?
Do you know what? Studying creative writing, I always say to people that the main driver for me to actually go and do that degree was 2 things. One is that I knew it would make my mum happy, because it's a sort of structure. But also, I would have never done it if I didn't get that degree for free. I got really fortunate in that there was a loophole, and it was the final year of the loophole before the fees went up, where if you hadn't completed a degree, then the government would give you a grant for your student fees for half of your fees each year. And then the university specifically would pay the other half as long as you earned below a certain threshold every year, which I did because my mindset was, because the degree was part-time. And so my mindset was, well, this is a part-time degree. I'm going to spend all the rest of my time writing because I don't need this degree. And I agree with that. I didn't need it. I don't think anyone needs a degree to write. Not to say it didn't come in useful, because there were very specific things that I think of from my degree, which I took away. And I think it definitely made me, it ultimately made me a better writer, no matter what, just for the fact that I was studying and working on my craft for 4 years and had to do it within a framework. But equally, I was writing outside of that. But I think one of the best things I got from the degree was we had to do workshops where you'd share your work in advance with the class. So everyone would have read it and then they give their feedback. And the way our workshops worked is they were typically maybe about 20 minutes or 30 minutes long. And for the first half of it, you're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to say anything whilst everyone gives notes. And then should you wish to, in the second half, you can talk. And actually, I would never talk. And I remember in my final ever lecture where we had a workshop and I spoke out, and my lecturer was so surprised because my typical reaction is to not talk. And a lot of people will typically think that I'm offended or I'm upset or about what people have said about my work, when actually I'm the complete opposite. My attitude to it has always been, when people are giving you feedback, you have to imagine that that is an audience watching your film or your play. And if they have critique on it, it's not because their critique on it is typically because they've not understood something. And it's my responsibility as the writer to make them understand what I want them to understand. Or equally, I might decide that it is there and they just don't get it, which is also fine. But more often than not, I would find that the critique, I think anyways, that critique, especially from people like that who I think are quite, I don't know if intelligent is the word, but certainly they gave good critique, is that it's usually on the money, that I can see something in my head, but I've not put it on the paper. And so it doesn't make sense. And I just need to clarify it. And the one time I ever spoke out, my lecturer disagreed with me, and we agreed to disagree. And he was like, you know what, we'll just see when you submit the final draft. And in that final draft, not only did I get a first, but my lecturer also wrote a note on the feedback saying, you were right. Because with that, I think I'd submitted a segment of it. And so I knew that in the context of the whole piece, it made sense. And so everything that everyone else was saying was wrong. It's just that they needed to see the piece as a whole thing. So that was the degree. I went and did it just to, make my mum happy, and because it didn't cost me anything to do it. But I hesitate to advise people to go and get a creative writing degree. I think it definitely has its benefits. But what I will say to people is, if you're going to get a creative writing degree thinking that you're going to come out of the other end and that is going to be your ticket into this industry as a writer, then you've got the absolute wrong idea. What it will do is hone you as a writer, hone your skills, make you better, make you stronger. But ultimately, the things that will get you into this field, at least as a writer, is by writing a banging script that makes people, look up and be like, oh my God, this script is amazing. And whether you do that in or out of your degree doesn't make a difference to me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific advice for students who want to follow in your footsteps and be a writer, about whether writing from personal experience or structure and things like that?
Yeah. I think I spent so many years of my career running away from writing about personal experiences and wanting to just be completely imaginative and just be wild. And the reason why I think I did that was, as a young Black man, I think my greatest fear has always been being pigeonholed as a writer. And I think actually when I stopped worrying about being pigeonholed and stopped worrying about, if I write this, this is going to result in this, I finally started hitting the mark a lot more. And it became a lot more consistent, and I also became more confident. And I always say that I'm at a point now where I feel like whatever I decide to write is going to have a higher success level, because I'm really more in tune with my voice and what I want to say and what I want to do. And so I guess the advice I would give is that it's such frustrating advice, because it's the advice that I was given for years, and I always say that you don't understand it until you do. And when you do understand it, it's because you've managed to do it, which is find your voice. And yeah, I've just written an email to someone just before we got in the school where they were asking for advice about writing. And I said to them, write what you want to write. Don't write what you think you should be writing or what people tell you you should be writing. Because I said, you can write what people tell you if it's in line with what you think you should be writing. But, you know, it's been a long slog for me. And, you know, now everything is going to plan somewhat and I'm doing all right. But there were so many times over the years where people were telling me to write or do certain things. Like a lot of people try to get me to like, oh, why don't you write a web series? Because this person's done this and it's been really successful and this and that. And I never did it because I was like, yeah, it has been, but that's not my route. And I think once you figure out what you think your route is, and your route should be led by what you want to write. And I always say to people, I'm very strategic. So I've paid a lot of attention to the people who have achieved the things I've wanted to achieve. And then I'll literally go on their agent's website, read through their bios, read through their CVs and be like, okay, they did this, they did that. So the Royal Courts Writers Group, for example, I only applied for it because there were writers who had achieved the things I wanted to achieve and I found that they'd done it. I'm currently on Channel 4's screenwriting program for screenwriting, which I've applied for every year since 2011 and finally got on it for the first time this year. But again, me applying for screenwriting is only because I saw people doing what I wanted to do who had done that. And then furthermore, then seeing that so many of these people had come from a theatre background. And I used to absolutely hate writing theatre. I used to find it really hard and I was far more confident in screenwriting. But when I realised that everyone who had achieved what I wanted to achieve, so many of them had come from a theatre background, I was like, well, if you can't beat them, join them. You're just going to have to figure out how to become good at this thing. And theatre has undoubtedly made me an infinitely better writer than I was when I wasn't writing. And I refer to myself as being a retired playwright now, but I can't take away from it how much better of a writer it made me. So those are the kinds of pieces of advice that I would give and hope they could be of use.
Thank you so much for them. Why do you think that theatre writing has made you a more successful writer?
Oh, that's easy to answer. With film and TV, right, you have the luxury of being able to jump around, chop the scene, cut from here to here, travel do all of the as madness that you want, at least in your head and when you write it. Of course, when it gets to commission a production company or whatever, they're going to make you narrow it down. But at least when you're writing, you can do whatever. With theatre, that can't work. You are in the moment, and not only even the moment, but also you can't hide behind glitz and glam. You can't hide behind cuts. You can't hide behind VFX and all these amazing visuals. You have to, it's often quite self-contained, and you have to be in the moment and keep the audience in the moment. I've watched plays where they've lost me for 1 minute, and because they've lost me for 1 minute, they've lost me for the rest of the play. And the great plays that I've watched keep you going all the way through, whether they are a play that's 1 hour long or they're like 3 hours long. Like The Ferryman, which is one of my favorite plays ever, is really, really long. And I remember knowing how long it was going into it and just being like, oh, goodness sake. And when I watched it, I didn't even feel it. That play just keeps you in all the way through. And so I think that's one of the reasons why theatre made me a better writer. I think also theatre demands don't get me wrong, film and TV also demands the following, but I think theatre made me good at it, is that you have to do so much character work and really, really work so hard on getting your characters, knowing who they are, being able to put them in a million different scenarios. And all of that I now apply to my film and my TV work as well. But those were foundations which I learned from theatre. And I guess I would say that, theatre, at least in the UK, I can't speak of anywhere else, but theatre, I feel, puts in a lot more work in developing writers than film and TV do. And I think it's a lot harder today in the modern age to be developed in some capacity by film and TV. The opportunities are very limited and very hard to come by. Whereas theatre, you can just join, even though the Royal Court's Writers Programme isn't easy to get onto, I applied for it 3 times. There are things there, whether it's the Royal Court, whether it's Theatre 503, whether it's Soho Theatre, there's a number of different programmes. And I feel like those things can, they will develop you in being able to do the things which then when you get to film and TV, you can apply that to your writing, and then it's there when you put the scripts in front of people.
Thank you so much for that. How do you find subjects to write about? You mentioned that you were inspired by High School Musical and music. What is that? Has that changed today?
I find it really hard to pinpoint what inspires me, and I say this because I just think I'm like crazy, like, because I think my mind moves at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and I'm thinking of like so many different things throughout the day. Like, if you ever have to sit in like a meeting with me, like, it's absolutely, my mind just flies all over the place, and that's kind of my day-to-day life, and I don't know how I manage to survive in this brain. But I think I read a lot and I consume a lot. And when I say I read and consume a lot, I'm not talking about books, although I try to read those too. But I mean, I read a lot of articles. Like, I'll see things posted on Twitter, and I'll save it into an app called Pocket. And then when I'm bored, I'll like go to Pocket, and then I'll find something to read and read that. And it's all sorts of things. Even Twitter itself, I pay attention to a lot to the people I follow and what they talk about, and just absorb it. But I think my ideas just come where it could be anything. I'm trying to think of, I think it's easier maybe if I think of like the things which I've written or I'm working on, and knowing where those came from. So if we're talking about No More Wings, for example, that, there's no hiding from that. That obviously comes from the fact that I grew up in South London. I went to a grammar school, and whilst it's not about me, it's very much about the environment I grew up in and the people I grew up around. If I think of, what else is there? I wrote a play a number of years ago called These Meaning Streets, which is about 2 people who are homeless, and you're seeing the story of how they ended up in that situation. And one of those characters, it's about the destruction of a romantic relationship, and the other one, it's about the destruction of a relationship between a mother and child. And again, those were things that I experienced. But then equally, another thing, The Bastard Prince, which I'm working on, is an experience which I can't relate to at all, other than I'm obviously Black and the lead character's Black, and there's a lot about race in there and class, which I absolutely can connect with. But the overall big story just comes actually from a friend who said to me, like 9 years ago, this friend said to me, imagine an idea where there's this secret kid that no one knows about, and they're the heir to the British throne. And that idea has just sat in my head for a good 7 or 8 years, until we've arrived at the point where I'm writing it. I'm trying to think of another idea which isn't inspired by my own experiences. There's loads, but the point is that I'm just always, I think I'm a sponge. Like, I take things in and I spend a lot of time thinking about them. I wrote No More Wings in 2019, but the idea was in my head maybe 2 years before, and it's just me trying to find the time to write things. And ultimately, I write about things that I deeply care about, whether it's my own experiences or not. And I think you're always onto a winner if you're passionate about something, because when No More Wings, as I know from just writing an email, I wrote 13 drafts of No More Wings, and you don't write 13 drafts of something if you don't love it and if you're not passionate about it. And I flicked through the drafts over the weekend for something very particular, and I was just seeing the changes that like draft 1 and draft 4 and 7 and 13, and remembering things which, even though they're not in the final draft of the script, they impacted what I did in the film as a director. And so I just write what I really care about, and I spend a lot of time thinking, whether consciously or subconsciously, about these ideas, and then one day I end up actually writing the script, and it all just kind of comes out.
When you do work from personal inspiration, do you ever find it difficult to find an authorial distance, or is it ever hard to share any of your work with friends and family?
The answer to both is the answer. I think the answer is no, but actually, okay, the answer to the first one is no, which is the distance thing. I find really easy, and the reason why is because for me to write anything that's about personal experience, I can't start until I've found something which I can put in it that helps me to distance from it. Because my problem with writing from personal experience is that it can be very easy to feel like you're bound to the truth. And so for me, I have to quickly find something that isn't true that can then give me the freedom to be creative and not feel like I have to stick to the truth. So if I think of my play, All the Shit I Can't Say to My Dad, which is a play about a father-son. In fact, the title says everything, right? The thing that I found in that play to distance myself from it was two things. One, the play's about a musician. I'm not a musician, and it's about him writing making his debut album. And the second aspect of it is that, spoiler alert, the dad dies in the play. My dad is still alive and breathing. I spoke to him on Sunday on my birthday. And so those two things allowed me to distance myself from the piece. And so that's something I can't really start writing until I find that thing where it's not about me. Like, again, with These Minging Streets, there's aspects of that which are nothing to do with me. And then in terms of sharing it with the friends and family, I think it can definitely be difficult, whether it be that it's my experience or even experiences that have happened to them, because you sometimes worry about how people are going to interpret their depiction. Like, my dad definitely, felt quite strongly about that play and took, we had some strong conversations, which were a shame for me that was what he decided to kind of hang on to. But ultimately, I always say to people that when I'm actually writing the piece, I don't spend any time thinking about what those people are going to think or feel, because if I do think about it, I won't write the best piece, because I'm worrying that, oh, this person's going to be offended, this person's going to be upset. And actually, what I found more often than not, one of my friends said to me, who's a playwright and screenwriter, Emma Dennis Edwards, in the lead up to All the Shit I Can't Say to My Dad, I was worrying about it. And she told me about a story of how her dad came to see one of her plays, and he was commenting on like one of the characters and criticizing him. And she was just like, I cannot believe this man doesn't realize that this is about him. And I think that, that kind of experience, which I've had with different pieces of mine, makes me realize that people aren't always going to realize. And actually, sometimes they do realize, but they're in denial. And that is also fine, which is that, but either way, anyone who ever has realized so far, it hasn't been the destruction of our relationship. And I also think I don't write any of my characters with a view of condemning them. I try to write really balanced characters where the audience can see both sides to this person, and it's up to you what whatever you decide about that character is more about you than it is about me and what I've written. Because you can decide to see someone as a bad guy, but I don't write bad guys. I write people who do good and bad things, because humans do good and bad things, and it's down to us how we decide to perceive it.
Yeah, that's really important. You recently said about All the Shit I Can't Say to My Dad that you wanted audience to see the story as universally relatable. Do you find that you feel a responsibility to write about the Black British experience, or like you said before, you don't want to be pigeonholed into writing about one experience?
I didn't used to think I had a responsibility. I used to hate the idea of having a responsibility, because what was being produced as the Black British experience historically was not necessarily what I considered to be my own experience. And so I spent a long time fighting that, because I didn't want to make work like that. As much as I loved the kind of work which I'm thinking of, like, for example, one of my favorite films is Kidulthood. I never want to write a Kidulthood, but I love Kidulthood. And so I fought it for a long time because I didn't want to be put in that position. But over time, I've come to realize that, firstly, I've been very fortunate in that no one has tried to pigeonhole me. And so even when I'm writing things which have Black characters at the heart of it, I'm writing what I want to write. And so therefore, I am writing one or a few different versions of the Black British experience that I want to talk about, the stories that I want to tell. And so actually now we're all good, because I'm still writing what I want to write without feeling like anyone's trying to force me to write anything. And so in that regards, I do feel a sense of responsibility, because, you know, writers, they're like people who are writing in a way that I'm writing, whether it be, you know, not necessarily the stories I'm telling, but writers who aren't writing what we've stereotypically seen for so long. We are, I believe, what people like myself have been wanting, which is that we want stories which tell a variety of stories of the Black British experience. You know, kidulthood and any kind of film to do with that kind of culture. For me, those films are not the problem. The problem is that why don't we, yeah, let's talk about, let's say, films with white characters, right? So something like Mean Streets, or Green Street, no, not Mean Streets, sorry, that's a Scorsese film. Green Street, which I think had Elijah Wood in it or something. Great film, a football film. Green Street is not a problem, or Snatch, or The Layer Cake. These films are not a problem because we have hundreds of films which are representing all facets and versions of white Brits. So therefore, that's not a problem. It becomes a problem if that's the only version you see. And so equally for me, all I want for Black writers and filmmakers is to have to be afforded the same variety. If we're afforded the same variety, the critique stops. It stops being a problem that we're only seeing one version of of the Black British narrative. So yeah, that's where I hope I answered the question.
No, you did. Do you find that sense of responsibility kind of inspired you to set up your own production company, or was there another reason for sort of taking ownership of production?
Setting up my own production company came, like most decisions I make in life, it comes from a place of frustration. I mean, the name says it all, Creative Blue Balls. I was frustrated because I had all these ideas and all these stories, and I just couldn't get anyone to make them. And then I've just thought, well, I believe these stories I want to tell are good. And I think something less of a problem now, but a problem I felt in the past was that people didn't really get my work on paper. It took them being able to see it physically to appreciate it. And so when I would be in these situations, you know, I was trying to make, before Creative Blue Balls, I set up to make plays. And it was because I wasn't really, you know, for me, it was that to make a short film costs a lot of money, especially to make a good short film. And I'm quite strategic and quite business minded in that, you know, I reckon I could get someone to give me, let's say, arbitrary number, £5,000 to make a short film. I could get in touch with people who would have that kind of money. However, like anyone who's business minded, most people want a return, and they want a financial return, or at a very minimum to make their money back. With a short film with the best will in the world, there is absolutely no way I can guarantee that. What I did know is that I could guarantee it with theatre, that I could literally be like, right, these are the numbers. If you give us this money, this is how much we will sell the tickets for, and we will be able to break even. And so that means I've made my investors happy, and then I can do what I want to do, is which have the work on physically for people to see, and invite them to come and see it. And that's how I managed to get some doors open, because I would reach out to these producers, these production companies, like, hey, I'm putting this on and please come and see it. And what really helped was they were all short plays, but with every showcase I've done of my own work, there's been at least 3 or 4 short plays all written by me. So on top of that, these audiences, including industry people, have been able to see the different types of work. And so that actually helped with not pigeonholing me either, because you're seeing one play which is a comedy about these 2 17-year-old kids, and one of them stolen his dad's car and crashed it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you're seeing a monologue about a struggling artist who's losing his mind and trying to deal with all of the pressure of being an artist. And then on the other side, you've got a story about a Nigerian girl who's bisexual, and she's having to deal with her sexuality, and also having to contend with she's also a Christian, and so having to deal with her father and him trying to get him to accept her sexuality as well as her. So, you know, all very different stories, but to be able to get someone to come and see that in one night, it was very helpful. So that's where setting up the company came from, and just how can I get my work in front of people in the best way where they can see what I'm capable of doing as a writer.
So do you think your kind of investment banking and finance background has actually helped you in having this kind of business side to your creative energy as well? And is that something you would say that is a good thing to have as a creative?
Yes, 100%. I would say, you know, I would go even further back from the investment bank and actually just say my education as a whole is why I have that mindset. Because, you know, I always say to people, I don't consider myself particularly creative. I can just write really well. That's it. The other stuff, I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't do any of that. I'm just good with words. That's been my thing. And so, and it all comes from the foundations of academia. And so even with the way I approached writing was always in the same, yeah, I approached it in terms of, if I wanted to be a lawyer, these are the steps I need to take. Now, as a writer, that doesn't exist. But I had to somehow figure out, right, what do I need to do to get there, to get there, to get there? And so I would say absolutely that background helps me, because I just always thought of it in that way. And even my best friend always used to say to me, he'd be like, okay, Abe, I understand that your industry doesn't have these frameworks, but I don't care. How do we do this? How do we do this? You know, he very much is that mindset of, but there must be a way for us to do this so that we can figure out how you get there. And I would absolutely encourage everyone, writers, filmmakers, to do that. I don't think it's easy. I think it's really, really difficult. And part of Creative Blue Ball's ongoing work is to facilitate other writers in literally just giving them the exact same opportunities I've had. So in 2018, we commissioned 4 playwrights to write their own. Literally, we said to them, write whatever you want to write, we will produce it. And there was no kind of theme, there was no structure, there was no basis. It was simply playwrights whose work I'd seen over the years that I'd loved. And I was confident that if I gave them a blank slate, they would do well. And we're in the process of doing that now with short films, and it's going to be a slow process. But yeah, I've sent out my first couple of emails to 2 writers particularly who I think they have really amazing voices. And I want to give them the same thing again, which is like, right, we're going to make this, just write what you want and we will support you. That's what happened to me with No More Wings. I wrote what I wanted to write. I was given the money because I won the competition, and there was no sort of, you have to tick this box. The Soho House and IWC never ever interfered with the creative process, and that's why you end up getting a film which is so pure and so in line with what I wanted to say and do, because nobody interfered. So I would advise all writers to definitely, if they can, to just try and think more business-minded and more, not even business-minded, more strategic in how they're trying to achieve whatever they're trying to achieve as a writer and a filmmaker.
You've shown a real persistence with applying to lots of projects and schemes and things like that. Was it the same with applying to competitions, and how do you find out about competitions like Soho House?
So it absolutely, yeah, I'm like an applier. I apply for everything, and my biggest advice I can give to anyone who applies to stuff is you submit it and then you forget about it, because you're gonna, no matter how successful you are, between now and when you die, you will end up with more rejections than you will success, even if you win every single award under the sun. And so, yeah, it's not about the rejections, it's about the 1 or 2 which you succeed in. In terms of where to look, I would say there's a website called London Playwrights Blog. That sounds right in my head. LondonPlaywrightsBlog.com or something like that. If you Google those words, it will come up. They have a weekly email where they send out a bunch of opportunities, and they've got 2 categories, I think, which is opportunities with deadlines and opportunities without deadlines. Now, my process was literally, I would read that newsletter every week, pick out which opportunities I want to apply for and submit stuff. And I would say that. There's also the BBC Writers' Room website, which has an opportunities page. Keep an eye on that. I would say being on social media has been really helpful in that yeah, I couldn't tell you who to specifically follow on social media, but if you looked through my following on, probably Twitter's probably the best one, you'd probably pick out some useful things and be like, oh, those, you know, yeah, I should follow that account. And yeah, it could be anyone from whether it's industry people or specific accounts which post opportunities. And those things end up on my timeline. I think what's also been really helpful to me is everyone knows Abe writes. And as a result, people get, you know, friends who might just see a random opportunity. Even in the last week, like Channel 4 announced they were doing something which actually isn't applicable to me because it's not scripted, but people have seen that and they've just said, hey, this might be of interest to you. When people know what you do and what you want to do and how passionate you are about it, they will see things and they will send it through to you. What the other advice I would give in terms of what to submit is that later on in my journey, I made a rule where I decided that I would no longer write things, like I would basically no longer see an opportunity and be like, right, this is the theme, this is the opportunity, I'm gonna write for this, because it's actually, for me, and this is my process, other people's processes are different, but I found that really taxing and often it wouldn't be very beneficial. So what I decided instead was, whenever I saw opportunities, if I had something ready for it, then I would submit it. And that just turned out to be the best way for me, that, you know, submit what you have ready, because also it's not that you're rushing to write something really great for it, it's that it's already there ready. And ironically, with No More Wings, that's definitely an anomaly in that I wrote something specifically for that competition. But what I will say is the theme was time, and I remember thinking to myself, I don't know actually if, and now it's very obvious that No More Wings definitely does honor the theme of time. But when I first thought of writing it, I didn't know. I wasn't certain if the theme if it worked with the theme or not. But what I did know is I'd had this idea for 2-3 years. I knew it was good and I knew I was going to write it. And I just thought to myself, well, I'm going to submit what I'm going to submit. And either they'll read it and decide it doesn't work for the theme, or they'll decide that it does. And that's the second time, I think, in my career when I've done something like that. And the first was with a play called The Cage. And I think the theme for the competition which I submitted The Cage into was secrets. And The Cage was another one of those milestones which changed my career. And if I had decided, if I had allowed myself to think that with The Cage, I actually already had the scripts ready. But if I decided, oh, I don't think this works for the theme, I would have never submitted it. But I did. I was just like, well, I know this is a good piece of writing, and they can decide whether it works for the theme or not. So I think I've kind of jumped all over the place. But the advice I would give is, you know, write what you want to write and hope it fits with the theme, rather than writing to a theme and then, because chances are you'll be on a limited amount of time, you'll rush it, and it might not end up being that good, to be honest. With the Soho House opportunity specifically, that's a really long-winded story, but I was only eligible for that because I have a complimentary Soho House membership, and I have that because I'm a mentee on a program called Open House, which is a partnership between Soho House and a company called Creative Mentor Network. And if I had never applied for that thing, which again, yeah, I think this is actually hopefully a really good piece of advice. When I applied for this thing, I didn't apply because I wanted a mentor, because I've not had the best experiences with mentors, in that I know what I need and there's very few mentors that could give me that. All I knew is that I wanted to be in the right spaces to get opportunities. And so I just always thought that, well, in some capacity, through being associated with Soho House, somehow I would end up in spaces where I could get opportunities. And even though it wasn't in the way that I imagined, it meant that one day I get this email, which is the email that Soho House members get, and it's about, oh, we have our screenwriting competition, blah, 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 blah. And I see this and I'm like, yep, I'm going to apply for that. And here we are now, I've got this. And so, I don't know, I hope that's kind of helpful, because I think it is.
It was super helpful.
Really helpful. What was it like directing for the first time, and did you seek any advice from fellow directors, mentors, anything like that?
Directing for the first time was being in a constant state of panic and nervousness for 10 weeks. It was me waking up at about 5:30 every single morning, not because I'd set my alarm at that time, but because my brain was just constantly ticking and thinking I'm running out of time. And you know, I'm actually really happy that I felt that way, and I hope that the next time I direct, I'll feel like that again. I would go as far as saying that I don't think I ever want to be as confident in directing as I am in writing, because I feel like it was that feeling which kept me on my toes and meant that I directed what has ultimately turned out to be a great piece of work that is continuing to, you know, change my career and change my life. I did get a lot of advice and a lot of support. So firstly, I got support from directors who I've worked with before. So my friend Femi, who directed my first short film, Kobe Adom, sorry, who directed my second and third short films, who he actually directed on the BBC series Noughts and Crosses. He directed episode 4, 5, and 6, and he's just going from height to height. And that was his TV debut, actually. So I got a lot of advice from those people who I'd worked with before. I got a lot of advice from friends who were directors. People told me some books to buy. You know, Kobe was the one, I'm pretty sure the main book I read, Kobe told me to read it. And I think he even said to me that every time before he shoots something, he reads that book again. And I think going forward, I will do the same thing. I also, Soho House gave great support in that they arranged for me to shadow Sam Mendes on 1917. So I went on set for one day, shadowed Sam. I also spent a lot of time with his producer, Pippa Harris. I spent a lot of time with Jeb, whose surname I can't remember, but he's the president of Ambling and DreamWorks or something like that. And actually, even though it was only for one day, that experience was so incredible in terms of being on a set of that magnitude and being like, oh my God, this is actually what I want to do. And I feel like that day was when I actually decided because before that, I'd been saying, I'm just going to direct once and that'll be it. I'll never do it again. And on that day on set, which was about 4 weeks before we shot No More Wings, that was the first time when I thought, you know what, I actually do want to be a director, because I want to have this experience over and over again and have all, like, literally hundreds of people who are here to serve the vision that you have. It's absolutely insane. And Sam gave me, it's weird because Sam gave me such little yet impactful advice, where he said to me, when you're on set, make sure that when you're rewatching the takes that you've done, rewatch it on your own. Don't watch it with anyone else. Just watch it on your own. And he said, and if you don't see what you wanted to see, shoot it again. And the reason why he said watch it on your own is because when you're watching it with other people, you know, you might get influenced with them thinking, yeah, you've nailed it, you've hit it, you're ready. But you might not agree. There might be something that you've seen and that you think. And so I thought that was such great advice from him that really, you know, that's exactly what I did on set when I was like, put my headphones on and I'm just looking into the little monitor because, you know, unlike Sam, we don't have millions of pounds. So our setup was very different, but the same rules still applied. And that was such wonderful advice. And equally, Sam was like, look, you've written the script, you know what you want to say and you know what you want to do, and just absolutely trust that, but also lean in on the people who are around you and trust that you'll be able to do it. I spoke with Harry Woodliff, who directed a beautiful film called Only You, which is so stunning. I think it might be on Netflix. I know it was at some point, and if it still is, I'd encourage everyone to watch it. But I went to a screening of it last year, and I spoke to her after, and she told me, I think her short film that she made some years before, which was, I think it was either nominated for or won a BAFTA. That was her directorial debut, and she had no clue what she was doing. And so that gave me confidence, like her telling me, like, look, I had no idea what I was doing, but this was what I did. She gave me another book, which she recommended, but she also encouraged me, like, you know, you're the writer and you know what you're trying to say. But that aside, just equip yourself with talented people. And my script editor was phenomenal, who was with me from draft one. my producer Abby, who I've been working with for I don't know how many years now, from the beginning of me wanting to be a writer, so since like 2011, and she runs Creative Blue Balls with me. But Abby, you know, in terms of my crew, I only knew one person, which was Olan, my cinematographer, and I've been a big fan of Olan's work for years, and that was who I wanted to work with. Everyone else, Abby got. She found them, and I turned up on set one day, and I had met my set designer before, but Abby found my set designer for me. And the point I'm making here is that you know, some of the advice I received from so many people was that you need to, yeah, the main thing you need as a director is that you need to draw experiences from the actors, and you need to know what you want to do, and you need to know what you're good at. And I'm good at writing, so therefore the story I've written is apparently good, and I think I'm good at directing actors as well. Now, anything else is a bonus. You have some directors who are good with lighting, they're good with cinematography, they're good with, you know, all of these things. And the most important thing is knowing whatever it is you are good at, and everything else that you're not, delegate and trust the people around you. Because I trusted Abby, and so because I trusted Abby, I know that Abby has equipped me with incredible people who are all experts at what they do, and so I can lean in on these people and be like, you know, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve. Equally, they would ask me questions, and there's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. There's nothing wrong with turning around and being like, what do you think? Or what's your instincts on how we should do this? Because I'm not sure, but I'd like to hear. Because you've employed those people because you trust them to be able to do what they want to do. So by all means, empower the people around you. And so, you know, from pre-production to production to post-production, I was constantly unsure of whether I knew what I was doing. But it certainly kept me on my toes, and it meant that I massively leaned in on the people around me to ultimately make a beautiful and collaborative piece of work, which I would hope that everyone is proud of as much as I am.
It is amazing. I watched it. It's really good.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I think we'll just ask one last question before we open up the Q&A. So if anyone has some questions they'd like to type in, just ask them in the Q&A box. When it comes to finding a soundtrack or music for your productions, how do you go about that? Do you know, listen to a snippet of a song and think, I want to use this in a future piece, or how does it come about?
No, so if it hasn't already been clear from either the conversations or my work, I absolutely love music. Like, I love music more than film and TV. I say that God was really unfair because he gave me no musical talent whatsoever. and so when it came to picking the music for No More Wings, it just all came naturally, which was, you know, Top Striker, which is the first song in the film, was a song I'd heard. Actually, I'm actually friends with the artists, but I didn't pick the song because I was friends with them. I picked the song because it worked perfectly with my film, which is that it foreshadows what you're about to discover, which is that this was a kid who was once an aspiring rapper who was also talented about football. And these are themes which the film explores. With the second song, which was Hands in the Air, it was an instrumental. That was an instrumental from when I was growing up. And because that part of the film is set in the mid-noughties, it made sense to also have an instrumental from that period of time. And with the final song, Cycle, I can't word how happy I was to have that song, and it meant so much to me. And we worked really hard to get that song. And it came, that's a song that I was familiar with when I was young, when I was a teenager. It came out, I think, in 2006 or 2005, and it just came to me one day. I don't know if it was in pre-production or when I was on set. I think it was in pre-production, because I remember telling my friend about it on set, and I said to him, I thought of the perfect song to end this film with. It would be Wretch's Cycle. And once it had come to me, I just was like, we have to get this song. And thankfully we did we spoke with Wretch's team, and they watched a very rough cut of the film and they loved it. And they were like, yep, we will make sure you get the rights for this. And we didn't have to pay for it either. We didn't have to pay for any of the songs, which was incredible. But I've never kind of sat down and tried to be like, oh, what song would, or no, I've never sat down, listened to music and thought, oh, this would be great in a film. I think I just listen to so much music. And so when the time comes that I need to put music in my work, I know what songs to put in. Like in All the Shit I Can't Say to My Dad, there's some Marvin Gaye in there, and I think there was meant to be some Luther Vandross, and then we decided not to put it in there. But it wasn't because I heard the song and was like, oh, this, I'm going to keep this in my mind. It's just I'm always thinking about music anyway because I listen to it so much.
That's really cool. Our first question is from Dami, and he asked your opinion on going to film school because he's been directing theatre at university. What do you think? Is it a good idea to go to film school? You need to go into film, or just do?
Do you know what? I have absolutely no idea. But what I will say is I'll talk from the experience I'll talk from my observations of my peers who are doing very well. I think all of them have gone to film school. And I think I'm very fortunate in that I've not gone to film school, but a lot of the people I know have gone to film school. Kobe went to London Film School. Thomasin went to, I think, Met Film School, so did Ajani. But then equally, I can think of someone like Cecile Amike, who's doing incredibly well for herself. And annoyingly, I can't talk about the things that she's doing. But the things which she did a number of years ago was she had a web series on BBC called Aki and Saltfish, which came from her just shooting her own thing and putting it online. And then BBC loved it and commissioned her to do her own one. She then went on from there to end up directing an episode of the HBO series Insecure. And Cecile didn't go to film school. And there are, someone like Kayode Owumi, who did Hood Documentary and did, it's called Enterprise on which is on BBC Three. He didn't go to film school either, and he's doing really well. And again, that stuff he put online. So I think it's about knowing what you want to do and what kind of work you want to make. And I would say that if you're making stuff which is, let's say, comedic and or light, I think you can maybe get away with not going to film school and putting the stuff online and hoping that it goes viral or gets picked up. But I think if you're wanting to make like kind of big stuff that looks visually amazing and all of those things, I think there's definitely some merit to film school. But I'm also very aware that film school is not free, and I don't know how much it costs, but from what I've been told, it's very expensive. And in one way or another, you have to do the education. I did the education and continue to do the education, but I did it in 10 weeks. And what did I do? I just went and got advice from all the people who'd already done it. And then they gave me everything and I absorbed it like a sponge in 10 weeks. But also I had the thing which we cannot ignore, which is the incredible budget to be able to do that. Like I had a budget which none of my peers who have made short films have ever had. So that was something that I had to my benefit. So I hope that answers his question. I couldn't say personally whether I thought you should go to film school, but I think if you spoke to those friends of mine, they would encourage it if it's something you can do, because it's not an option for everyone.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions about the books that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Do
people want to know what books they're? Cool. Give me a second. I'm going to get up and go because I don't remember what they're called. And I hope someone will like type these. This is probably back to front, but this is a book called Making Short Films by Max Furlow and Clifford Furlow. I think Kobe told me to get this book. I think at least 2 directors told me to get this book and were just like, eat this book. So that's one. I didn't get to finish it, but Harry Woodliff recommended Film Directing Shot by Shot, which is by Stephen D. Katz. I read some of it and it was helpful, but I didn't finish it. And this book I'm about to grab, I've never read, but I think it's amazing. And the friend who lent it to me swears by it, to the point where actually I think he lost it at some point and he just bought another one. It's called Directing Film Techniques and Aesthetics by Michael Rabiger and Mick Herbis Cherrier. So those were the things that I didn't read the final one, but I'm definitely going to read this book one day, because even just skimming through it, I think it looks absolutely amazing and we'll get a lot from it. So yeah, those were the things I did. But I also just learned so much from my peers, to be honest. as well. Like my friend Femi, who directs, you know, I remember vividly, he came over and we sat down and we just went through one page of the script where he was like, okay, so here, for example, what do you think about this? Maybe you should do this. Maybe, you know, these are the kind of things you need to consider. And we spent a whole day just going through one page of the script. And with everything that we went through, I then knew how to go through the remaining pages of the script and what I needed to be thinking of as a director.
Do you have any advice about pushing through being too self-critical of your own writing in a way that stops you from writing freely?
Yeah, my advice is don't do it. It's weird because I'm really a tough critic in general, I think. And oh no, not a tough critic, but I have incredibly high standards for myself. But one thing I do not do is get wound up or caught up in criticizing my own work, in that I'm really impatient. So I just want to start writing, and I don't know who taught me this, but once upon a time, someone taught me to, when you start a first draft, don't look back, just keep writing. And that's exactly, in fact, I would go as far as saying that isn't even just how I write my first draft, that's how I write every single draft I write. Once I start a draft, I start from the beginning and I just go through to the end, and I don't look back, I don't read it whilst I'm writing, because especially in the case of a first draft, it is never going to be perfect. And so why are you wasting all that time, you know, reading it, redrafting, looking at, this is for me, I know other writers who have a very different process, but why are you wasting all that time reading what you wrote yesterday and then criticizing it and then having to rewrite that again, as opposed to pressing on? Because the thing is, once you have a complete first draft, you can then read that and be critical of it. But more importantly, and this is my big one, is I always say that part of why why people think my work is so good is because I'm very quick to write and then share. And I have some people in my life who I very much trust them with feedback, who I think actually know my writing better than I know it myself, where I would have written a very rough draft and then they'll come back to me and say, so what I think you're trying to say here and do here is this and that. And I'll hear it and I'll be like, oh my God, you're right. And I didn't even think of that. And once they've identified what I'm trying to do, they'll then say to me, so with that in mind, in your redraft, I think you should consider this. I think you should get rid of this because it's actually unnecessary. I think you should really hone in on this. And I think it's so much more useful having other people read your work than you critiquing yourself. I think what should maybe take me 20 drafts if I was only doing it myself takes me maybe 3 or 5 drafts, because instead I have other people looking with outside eyes to give me their perspectives and what I'm trying to do, and having those conversations where we go back and forth about what I'm thinking and what I want to do.
Thank you. We've got another question here, which asks,
keep on coming.
what is it like? What is it like directing, having never done acting?
That's a good question, because a lot of people say that. I know that a lot of actors find directing easier because they've acted before, and so they're used to what they hear from directors and what works. I guess what I'd say is that I don't know, because I don't know what it's like to have acted, but I think through actually the benefit of writing for theatre and being in and around theatre was that you get to spend a lot of time in and around the process than you would, like, you know, typically as a writer for screen, even though I've always been really lucky and people have welcomed and invited me to be a part of the process, typically doesn't really happen in screen. And whereas in theatre, the writer is in the room. And so I think over the years I've probably picked up things without meaning to pick them up. I think, again, in one of these books, I think it was the first book I talked about, there's a chapter which is about, you know, directing actors and how, you know, what kind of language you should and you shouldn't use, which was really helpful. So to bring it full circle, I guess, how was it? It was probably fine because I read the books that told me what to do. And also one thing I did do is I worked with a theatre director who's directed my work before and who's like a big brother to me and a mentor and many things. And in my first rehearsal with the 2 young boys in the film, he actually led the first half of it. And I was there to answer questions, but he kind of led it as like a workshop. And that then gave me the confidence of for the next 3 or 4 rehearsals that I did alone to know how to do it. So yeah, maybe if you've never acted before and you can't get the access to necessarily go on set, which probably might not even be the most useful experience anyway, to be honest, I would actually encourage to maybe get into a theatre director's rehearsal room and see how they work. I think that's quite helpful.
Thank you. I think this is our last question, but
Cool.
we wanted to know, do you have any TV or film recommendations, and what kind of stuff would you normally watch in your free time?
I watch so much stuff and then I forget all of it. The one thing I recommend to everyone, because I think it's the best TV show in the last 5 years, is This Is Us. And actually they just put the most recent season on Amazon. I'd actually already watched it because I found ways to watch it, but I think This Is Us is the most sensational writing I've seen in a very, very long time, and I would strongly recommend that to people for character work, for stories, for everything. I would recommend This Is Us. I would recommend episode 8 of Insecure season 4, which was like last week, I think, because I don't love Insecure as much. I like it, but I don't love it the way a lot of my friends love it. Season 4, episode 8, I consider to be a masterclass in writing, so much so that I am very, very, very vehemently trying to get hold of that script. I'm messaging friends in LA. I'm like, do you know anyone involved in Insecure who can get hold of that script for me so I can read it? I would recommend Richard Linklater's Before Sunrise trilogy. I think that's one of the best pieces of writing ever. And I guess my last recommendation would be, you know what, I've got a few more. I would say Boys in the Hood. I think Boys in the Hood is incredible, one of my favorite films ever. I actually said recently that I think if there's no Boys in the Hood, there's no More Wings, because Boys in the Hood at a very young age taught me the meaning of gentrification, and it also allowed me to see how we could have, you could set a film in the hood, so to speak, and yet it speak and say so much about the world and society with these universal characters. And the last one I was going to say was Breaking Bad. And I say Breaking Bad because I think Breaking Bad is one of the most, close to perfect series that I've ever watched. And now knowing more about how Breaking Bad was made, I am aware that from the very beginning, the writers knew 2 things. One, how many episodes they were intended there to be, and they picked the number of episodes to do. It's something to do with the periodic table and the same element as crystal meth. And the other thing they knew, spoiler alert if you've never watched it. I don't like spoiling it, even though it ended fine. Okay, cool. I won't say it, but they always knew how it was going to end, and they knew that from day one. And I think that so many series that they start really well and then they fall off, it's because the writers didn't know how it was going to end. And especially in America, where it's so shows get cancelled left, right and center, and so writers don't often take the time to think of what's going to happen season 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're just thinking, I hope we get past season 1, I hope we get past season 2. But then when you get surprised and you do make it there, all of a sudden you've not thought of that, and you have to remember, you have to release a new series each year, and then it starts to fall through the cracks. If you look at Game of Thrones on the last season and everyone criticizing it, it's because they went ahead of the authors of the book. What did you expect? And so equally, This Is Us, which is currently on season 4, the writers have always, Dan Fogelman, who created it, has always said that this series ends at season 6, and he knows how it ends. And that actually breaks my heart, because This Is Us is definitely the kind of series, because the way it's written is that it plays with time, and so they can spend some time in the past, they can spend some time in the future, and at different stages of these characters' lives. And because of the way it's crafted, you could go on for years and just keep diving in and out of different timelines. And so actually I really respect that they had already decided how many seasons it would be and what the story is. And even though it's going to break my heart to lose that show, I'm confident that it will never lose its excellence, because they'd always known that.
You can just keep rewatching it and rewatching it.
I will.
I think that's probably all that we have time for, but thank you so much for giving us your time. All of your answers were so fantastic, and thank you for everyone who joined the call and for your questions.
Please like our Facebook page for more updates and register for our next Q&A with Richard Eyre tomorrow, Thursday 11th at 7 p.m. And thank you again so much, Abraham, for giving us your wisdom and advice and amazing stories. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and sorry to everyone whose questions I didn't get to answer. It's probably because I talked for too long, but thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.